11 WNBA records in a single game, not across a season, not across an entire career. One night, Caitlin Clark accounted for 8 of them. Kelsey Mitchell added another. Sophie Cunningham added one more. And Tasha Harris completed the night with a record of her own. What happened against the Dallas Wings wasn't simply another Indiana Fever win. It was a night where the record book seemed to change every few minutes. And somehow, it all started with a moment that had everyone inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse worried. Caitlin Clark was limping toward the tunnel, grabbing at her ankle, while more than 17,000 fans suddenly went quiet. Nobody knew whether she would return. Nobody knew how serious the injury might be. But somehow, Clark came back in the third quarter and helped turn the entire game around. And by the final buzzer, Indiana had produced one of the most remarkable statistical performances of the season. There was already history between these two teams. Dallas had defeated Indiana on opening night, giving the Wings an early season win that stayed in the minds of Fever players and fans. So when Indiana faced Dallas again on August 14th, this wasn't just another regular season matchup. Indiana had a chance to answer back. Early in the game, though, Dallas looked comfortable. The Wings were hitting shots, staying competitive, and playing with the confidence of a team that had already beaten Indiana once. Then, just before halftime, everything changed. Clark went down and grabbed at her ankle. She appeared to favor it as she walked toward the locker room. Suddenly, the biggest question of the game wasn't about the score. It was whether Clark would even return. The Fever had already experienced how difficult life could be without her. Dallas had shown that they could take advantage of it. So every minute Clark spent inside the locker room created more uncertainty. Then came the moment Indiana fans were waiting for. Clark walked back onto the court for the third quarter. And she didn't look like someone trying to protect an injured ankle. She immediately attacked the basket. Aaliyah Boston found her for an early score, and the energy inside the building changed instantly. But the biggest shock was still coming. Clark exploded for 17 points in the third quarter, shooting 7-for-9 from the field. What had looked like a potentially devastating injury scare suddenly became the beginning of an incredible comeback. Indiana's offense caught fire. Dallas' lead disappeared. And within minutes, the entire game had flipped. But Clark wasn't finished. Clark finished the game with 29 points and 10 assists, producing exactly the kind of all-around performance that has defined her season. Her scoring and playmaking have created a statistical pace that is almost impossible to believe. The source material places Clark at 39.8 points produced per game when combining her scoring and assists, based on a season average of 21.7 points and 8.2 assists. Those numbers explain why her name keeps appearing in the record book. Clark now holds a record for the most 25-point games by a point guard in WNBA history. That's significant because point guards traditionally carry the responsibility of creating opportunities for everyone else. Clark is doing that while simultaneously producing scoring numbers normally associated with high-volume scorers. And then there's another milestone. Against Dallas, Clark recorded her 20th career game with at least 20 points and 10 assists. According to the source material, no other WNBA player has more than 10 such games across an entire career. Clark reached 20 of them in just 83 games. She also has 13 career games with at least 25 points and 10 assists, with 7 coming during this season alone. Sabrina Ionescu, one of the league's premier guards, has 6 such games across her career. Then we get to the assist milestones. Clark became the fastest player in WNBA or NBA history to reach 700 career assists, doing it in only 83 games. And this wasn't an isolated achievement. She also reached 200, 300, 400, 500, and 600 assists faster than anyone before her. That means Clark hasn't simply reached one assist milestone quickly. She has repeatedly broken the speed record at every major checkpoint. She has also recorded 30 double-doubles in 83 games, placing her third all-time among WNBA guards according to the source material. And there's an even bigger possibility ahead. Clark is on pace to become the first player in WNBA history to average 20 points and 8 assists over an entire season. That's what makes this season so unusual. The numbers aren't coming from one explosive game. They are accumulating night after night. But Clark wasn't the only Fever player rewriting history. While Clark's numbers naturally grabbed most of the attention, Kelsey Mitchell was quietly producing a record of her own. Mitchell entered this game with 18 consecutive games scoring at least 20 points. 18 straight. Think about how difficult that is. Every opponent knows you're coming. Every defense studies your tendencies. Teams change their coverage. They try to force you into difficult shots. They make adjustments from game to game. And Mitchell still kept scoring. That streak became a WNBA single-season record. What made it even more important against Dallas was the timing. Clark went down before halftime, and for a period of time, Indiana didn't know whether its superstar would return. Someone had to keep the offense moving. Mitchell answered. She continued scoring while Clark was in the locker room, preventing Dallas from building the kind of lead that could have completely changed the game. Then Clark returned and exploded in the third quarter. But Mitchell didn't disappear. She continued getting to her spots and knocking down shots, forcing Dallas to deal with two major scoring threats at the same time. That is what makes Mitchell's streak so impressive. It's not simply about reaching 20 points once. It's about doing it repeatedly while defenses know exactly how important you are to the offense. And Indiana needed every bit of that consistency. Then there's Sophie Cunningham. Earlier in the season, Cunningham became a major part of the conversation surrounding Caitlin Clark and the physicality debate after the incident involving Chendi Carter. Cunningham's outspoken presence attracted plenty of attention, including boos from opposing crowds. But instead of allowing that attention to define her, Cunningham responded with production. According to the source material, she's shooting 45.5% from three-point range on at least 100 attempts, giving her the best three-point percentage in the WNBA. That's important because we're not talking about a handful of attempts. A player can shoot an absurd percentage over a few games and then fall back to earth. But once the sample reaches 100 attempts, maintaining that level of efficiency becomes much more difficult. Cunningham has done it, and her shooting has become extremely valuable for Indiana. Why? Because defenses can't simply collapse around Clark and Mitchell. If Cunningham is standing outside the three-point line and shooting at that level, leaving her open becomes dangerous. That spacing creates opportunities everywhere else. Clark gets more room to attack. Mitchell gets cleaner looks. Boston gets more space around the paint. One player's shooting can change the geometry of an entire offense, and Cunningham has become a major part of that equation. But perhaps the most unexpected record of the night belonged to Tasha Harris. Before this game, Harris had struggled offensively. According to the source material, she had scored only 3 total points across her previous 6 games. Then came August 14th. 5 three-point attempts. 5 makes. Perfect from deep. Harris had never made that many threes in a game before, and most of the damage came in the fourth quarter. She knocked down 4 of her 5 threes in the final period, helping Indiana dominate the fourth quarter 35-21. This was an empty production. The game still mattered. Dallas was still trying to fight back, and Indiana needed someone outside its biggest names to close the door. Harris answered. She is the kind of player who can easily go unnoticed during a long season. She's a backup guard, someone who steps in when Clark needs a break or when Indiana wants another ball handler. But that's exactly why depth matters. A team doesn't know in advance when it will need its bench. And on this night, Indiana needed Harris. She was ready. After the game, Clark praised Harris not simply for making shots, but for the way she supports the entire team. Clark described Harris as one of the best teammates she's had and emphasized that Harris brings the same energy whether she plays 2 minutes or 20. That's the kind of quality that doesn't appear in a box score. Harris also talked about watching Clark and how unusual it feels to see a player of her caliber up close. And when her number was finally called, Harris delivered. 5-for-5 from 3, a career night, a record-breaking performance. Then there's Aaliyah Boston. Boston didn't set one of the headline records that night, but her impact was just as important. She finished with 16 points and 10 rebounds, recording a double-double, and 10 of her points came in the fourth quarter. That timing matters. When outside shots aren't falling, Boston gives Indiana another way to score. She can finish around the basket. She can rebound. She can create second chances. Against Dallas, she provided exactly that. The Fever's biggest advantage is a combination of different skill sets. Clark can create from the perimeter. Mitchell can score in bunches. Cunningham stretches the floor. Boston controls the paint. And players like Harris can suddenly step in and change a game. That makes Indiana much harder to defend. If a defense focuses entirely on Clark, someone else gets an opportunity. If it loads up on Mitchell, Boston can attack inside. If defenders collapse toward the paint, Indiana has shooters waiting outside. And when one player gets hurt or struggles, another player can step forward. That's what the Dallas game demonstrated better than almost anything else. Part 7, Clark versus Paige. And then there's a storyline that continues to follow Caitlin Clark everywhere she goes. Caitlin Clark versus Paige Bueckers. The connection goes back years, long before either player entered the WNBA. Both were heavily hyped as young stars. Both became major names before reaching professional level. And now their paths have crossed again at the highest level. Against Indiana, Bueckers showed exactly why she is considered one of the league's brightest young stars. She finished with 29 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists, matching Clark's scoring total. That is what makes this matchup so compelling. It's not simply a manufactured rivalry. It's two elite players trying to win. Clark can explode for huge scoring numbers while creating opportunities for teammates. Bueckers can answer with her own offensive production and force Indiana's defense to adjust. Every time they share the court, the comparison becomes impossible to ignore, and that rivalry could become one of the defining stories of the WNBA for years to come. 11 records in one game. But the biggest story isn't really the number 11. It's what those records reveal about the Indiana Fever. Clark had an injury scare and returned to dominate the third quarter. Mitchell continued an unprecedented scoring streak. Cunningham became one of the league's most efficient three-point shooters. Harris went 5-for-5 from deep after barely scoring in the previous 6 games. Boston delivered a double-double and dominated the fourth quarter inside. And suddenly, Indiana looks like a team with far more weapons than just one superstar. That's what makes this night so important. Because playoff basketball is different. Defenses become more aggressive. Teams target weaknesses. Rotations tighten. Stars are forced to carry heavier workloads. A team cannot survive on one player alone. Indiana's performance against Dallas showed that the Fever may have the kind of depth required to survive those moments. And perhaps the most remarkable part is that Clark accomplished all of this while still dealing with questions surrounding her health. If Indiana can get healthy and maintain this level of production, the rest of the league has a serious problem. The record book may remember the 11 records. Fans may remember Clark's 29 points and 10 assists. They may remember Mitchell's incredible streak, Cunningham shooting, or Harris going perfect from 3. But the biggest takeaway should be this. Indiana didn't win because one player saved them. Indiana won because the entire team answered the moment. And that could matter more than any single record when the playoffs arrive. So now the question is yours. Who is the face of the WNBA right now? Caitlin Clark or Paige Bueckers? Let me know your answer in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more WNBA stories, records, rivalries, and the biggest moments from around the league.